There's one. Set for stun.
The Lord Be With You podcast show, also known as Christian Fandom Geek on YouTube, is a Red 5 show, also affiliated with Fandom Collective. So, enjoy the show, and the Force will be with you very soon on the Lord Be With You podcast show.
This is where the fun begins.
Welcome to the Lord Be With You podcast show, also known as Christian Fandom Geek on YouTube. Hope you are keeping well and safe in the times that we are living in. Came across this interesting story on Inverse, and it's pretty exciting stuff. And it's talking about Dave Filoni just teased an epic Jedi showdown in Mandalorian Season 3. So, this is interesting, guys. The sort of stuff that we love on Christian Fandom Geek. A lot of kind of fandom geek fantasy sort of lightsaber battles, things like that. Absolutely amazing. So let's just go on with this one here and have a look at what Inverse are saying. Could Ahsoka beat Luke Skywalker in a lightsaber fight? So I'm going through this sort of story here about what they're saying. While this claim may suggest a complicated fan theory, the simple fact of Ahsoka's force prowess relative to Luke's isn't as controversial as you might think. Okay, let's go on. In a recent interview, Mandalorian co-creator and Clone Wars guru Dave Filoni pointed out that technically Ahsoka has vastly more training than Luke has. She's actually his senior, which I think is actually difficult for people to remember. Here's why. So that's his quote there, and then let's go on with what Inverse is saying here. Here's why Ahsoka being Luke Skywalker Sr. makes more sense in established canon, and what it could mean if Ahsoka were to hypothetically face off against Luke in either Mandalorian Season 3 or her own up-and-coming TV series. Spoilers ahead for Mandalorian Season 2. Okay, so in the last episode I've done previously to this one, I spoke about the new Ahsoka TV show, and we talked about that that Hayden Christensen is going to be in that show as either Anakin Skywalker or Darth Vader. So that's going to be really interesting. Now, obviously, going through this story, there are spoilers for the end of Season 2 of The Mandalorian, which I think most of us have watched by now. So I think we're safe on this one, I think. Okay, and if you haven't, go and watch the end of Season 2 of Mandalorian, because there will be spoilers on that. Okay, so let's go ahead on this one here. Is Ahsoka a more powerful Jedi than Luke Skywalker? Obviously, this can come down as a bit of a controversial one, because I know a lot of us are Luke Skywalker fans. I'm a Luke Skywalker fan, but then I also know that there's a lot of you out there that are Ahsoka fans, and that Ahsoka's a really popular character. And obviously, recently in this would be spoiler territory. You know, she's was in Season 2 of The Mandalorian, her first live action appearance of the character, and it was phenomenal. Great episode. I think it was called The Jedi. Great episode, a lot of fun, and really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed seeing her as a live action character, and I would love for them to bring her together with Luke Skywalker, as long as it was done in a really respectful and a really interesting way. Okay, so let's carry on what they're saying. Because Luke Skywalker is not the actual chosen one and did not bring balance to the Force in the Return of the Jedi, contemporary Star Wars canon has basically contextualized Luke as just some guy. Now, I think that's completely false. I don't think at all that Luke is just some guy. For me, and I am coming from a very Christian point of view on this, there's a huge redemption story in Luke, redeeming Vader and bringing Anakin Skywalker back to life from Vader. There's a huge redemption story. It's a very biblical, archetypal story of the son bringing redemption to the situation. Obviously, within Christianity, my own faith, it's Jesus bringing redemption to God's creation. There is a huge redemption story, and obviously in Star Wars it's a little bit different because it's going more into sort of the archetypes and things like that. But I think there's a really strong biblical overtone there. And Luke certainly isn't just some guy. The other argument you could say as well is that obviously, Luke is the son of Anakin Skywalker. So if the father's going to be very strong in the Force and very powerful in the Force, then you would expect that could apply to the son as well. So yeah, I don't think that works out. I think that's a bit of a shallow argument. I don't think that works on that one there. Anyway, Let's continue. In other words, he's mostly shaped by circumstances rather than destiny. We've never been shown a chart of Luke's midichlorian count relative to those of other Jedi. Suffice to say, Luke's skills as a Jedi in the Mandalorian show, his fighting skills have improved since episode 6, but he's still nowhere near Ahsoka's complete and utter mastery of a lightsaber. Okay, interesting. So, okay, this is brushing on the hero's journey. So, whereas Anakin, with the high midichlorian count, you know, we don't even know who his father was. It's almost like a sort of vergence in the Force, some special manifestation of the Force in a kind of supernatural, magical sort of way, as instantiating with great sensitivity and power in the Force. Luke's journey is not so much about his intuitive ability, although he is strong in the Force. It's more about him going on this epic journey and realizing that he's the hero, and then obviously getting into a situation where he has to redeem his father once he finds out that he's, that Anakin Skywalker, that Darth Vader is Anakin Skywalker, and that's his dad. So it's an interesting one there. I would say yes. I think that you could say on one level, okay, Luke was shaped by the circumstances of having to go with Ben and help Princess Leia. And he didn't want to do it. He was reluctant to do it, but he eventually went on his journey and found out that, and through that process, he became the hero. He became the master of two worlds. He retrieved the boon, and he became a great hero. But I think on the other hand, I would also say this, that Luke's redemption story, there does seem to be a destiny to it, because the prophecy on Anakin would be that he would bring balance to the Force, and he couldn't do that without Luke. So it's not an arbitrary, random thing that Luke just decided to just go on his journey. Luke's journey was integral to Anakin Skywalker coming back after what happened, turning to the dark side and becoming Darth Vader. And so you can't really, for me, they're interconnected. And so in that respect, there's a sort of destiny that's on Luke within its own right. And I think the articles, this story's probably been a little bit shallow on how they're sort of deconstructing that. But anyway, let's move on. And so, okay. So let's continue. And we'll do this. This is going to be more than one part, because this story is quite long. So I'm not going to do it all in one episode here. So let's get to this part here, and then we will continue this in episode 2, or part 2 of this Luke Skywalker versus Ahsoka special episode. Okay, here we go. In the behind the scenes Mandalorian season 2 special on Disney Plus, Filoni makes this pretty clear. Wondering aloud, I don't know who's been teaching Luke sword fight training lately. In contrast, Ahsoka received training at the Jedi Temple and also directly from Luke's father, Anakin Skywalker. When it comes to powerful influences, Luke has Obi-Wan and Yoda. Ahsoka was also trained by those guys, as well as Anakin and at least a dozen other Jedi. Whether this makes Ahsoka more powerful than Luke isn't clear. Anakin was probably a more powerful Jedi than Obi-Wan, but Obi-Wan was still able to defeat him on Mustafar. You can insert a meme here about Obi-Wan having the high ground. I love those memes. They're hilarious. But the truth is, Obi-Wan defeated Anakin not because Obi-Wan was stronger in the Force, but because he got in Anakin's head. Okay, so there's quite a lot there. First of all, in terms of Luke's training and Ahsoka having more training, that could be a fair argument. That's probably a fair argument that she would be trained with more intense training from more different types of Jedi than Luke. But she's not directly related to Anakin, who has a high midichlorian count. So yeah, it's one of them ones. And I know the midichlorian thing is a retcon, and it's ad hoc, and it's an argument in its own right about how they move from the Force being in the universe and kind of holding the universe together to a more materialist version where it's just how many midichlorians you have on how many midichlorians any organism or body has makes you stronger in the Force. I know it's controversial. It didn't really work in episode 1 for me, but George Lucas did that. It is what it is. Okay. So going on from that, though, where it talks about the high ground and Obi-Wan defeated Anakin because he got in Anakin's head, I completely disagree with that. This is again where the story is very shallow. It's not just because he got in his head that he beat him. Obi-Wan knows Anakin like the back of his hand. He trained with him. He was one of the guys. Goodness me. Anakin was his Padawan. He trained him up in how to be sensitive to the Force, in using a lightsaber. He wasn't the only one, obviously, but he still was his kind of main guy that was training him up. And so he would know him. He would know him like the back of his hand. Let me give an example of this to make it even more interesting. I'll give a sports analogy. Imagine that you are a footballer. Now, I know in America you call it soccer, but I'm in the UK here, so we're calling it football. That's what it is. And imagine you're training with Lionel Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo, probably two of the most famous footballers on the planet, who are at the peak of their powers at the moment. Although I am a Kylian Mbappe fan, but that's another conversation. Now, imagine that you're training with these guys for about 10 years. So you're at the same club as either Ronaldo, or maybe at Real Madrid, or Lionel Messi at Barcelona, and you're with them for years. And you're training with them. You know their skills. You know their moves. When they come up with a new skill, you see it because you're with them. You train against them. If you ever play against Lionel Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo, you're going to be better equipped to be able to actually play against them than somebody who just watches them on TV but never doesn't really play against them or has never played against them before, because you know them, you know their maneuvers, you know their tricks, you know them, you know how fast they are, you know which direction they're going to go, you know how they think. You're around that person. You're around Cristiano Ronaldo. You're around Lionel Messi, and it's the same thing with Obi-Wan and Anakin. It wasn't that just that Obi-Wan got in his head. It really wasn't. He knows Anakin. He knows his fighting style. He knows his maneuvers. They are matched up really evenly. And even though you might say technically Anakin's more powerful in the Force, Obi-Wan not only knows Anakin, but he's also a very accomplished and experienced Jedi and swordsman in his own right. So you have that together of the knowledge and the experience. And of course he could match Anakin because he knew him. Anakin wasn't going to be able to pull a maneuver that would surprise Obi-Wan. He'd been around him for too long. He'd helped train him up. There's no way Anakin was going to be able to surprise Obi-Wan in their fight on Mustafar. It just weren't going to happen. And what happened in the end is that Obi-Wan surprised Anakin because he has more experience just in general, and the experience paid over youth in that situation. So this is where you have to be really clever with stories like this, guys. Like this, these guys in the universe are doing a nice story, but actually it's quite a shallow story, and they kind of come out with something like that isn't quite right. So I'm just gonna have to quit that. So okay, this is the first part. We've come to the end of this first part, this first episode of Luke versus Ahsoka. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I really appreciate you listening to this episode, and we'll be back with you very soon again on the Law Be With You podcast show.